It was a warm summer's evening on the West Somerset Railway, and Thomas the Tank Engine was waiting at Dunster station. He and Sir Topham Hatt had been invited to visit the railway and were on their way to Minehead for a big welcome. "I can't wait to get to Minehead station and meet everyone," said Thomas excitedly. "You said you had a friend that worked on this railway, didn't you, sir?" "Yes, Thomas, I have," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "Mr. Peters and I have been friends for a long time, and I'm sure you'll get to meet him once we reach Minehead. And I know he's very keen to finally meet you, especially after I told him how useful you are." "Thank you, sir," puffed Thomas proudly. "Although I do hope my branch line back on Sodor will be all right without me. I'm sure my passengers will miss their regular train rides." "I'm sure your passengers will be fine, Thomas. There's no need to worry about your branch line," chuckled Sir Topham Hatt. "I've arranged for Percy and Toby to look after it while you're away. Bertie said he'll lend a hand too." Thomas smiled, thinking about his friends back home. "Right then," he continued, "let's get going. We don't want to keep everyone waiting." And with that, Sir Topham Hatt walked down the platform and climbed aboard Annie. "Yes, sir," peeped Thomas. "Minehead, here we come." "I wonder what kind of jobs I'll get to do here," wondered Thomas. "I do hope we get there soon. I can't wait to get started." "Yes, it will be nice to finally arrive," said Annie sleepily. "I don't know about you, Clarabel, but I'm rather looking forward to a nice long rest after our long journey here." "Yes, Annie, it'll be nice to finally rest my wheels for the night. You should get some rest too, Thomas. You don't want to be tired tomorrow, do you?" "But I'm too excited. There's going to be a party tomorrow night to welcome us to the railway, and I want to make a good impression and show everyone that I'm a really useful engine, especially as we've come all this way." "We understand," sympathised Annie. "But as Clarabel said, you don't want to end up being tired and running late on your first day." Despite his excitement, Thomas couldn't help but be tired too. "It sounds like we're not the only ones who need to rest their wheels," laughed Clarabel. "Well, I suppose I am a little tired," he said wearily. "And a good night's rest would be nice before we start work in the morning." The three friends continued their journey towards Minehead, and it wasn't long before they were nearing the station. As Thomas's train pulled into the station, he looked around and noticed a smartly dressed man standing on the platform. He wondered if this was Sir Topham Hatt's friend, when the man stepped forward and introduced himself. "Hello, and welcome to the West Somerset Railway. You must be Thomas, the famous tank engine I've heard all about. It's great to finally meet you. My name is Mr. Peters, and I must say it's a pleasure to have you here." "Thank you, sir," puffed Thomas. "I'm excited that we have been given the chance to come and visit your railway, and I can't wait to get started." "That's what I like to hear," said Mr. Peters. "Sir Topham tells me you're a very hard-working engine, so I'm looking forward to working with you and making sure that you and all our visitors have a great time at the party tomorrow night." Just then, Sir Topham Hatt walked up. He greeted his friend warmly and started telling him all about Thomas. "Thomas is one of the most useful engines I know, and I'm sure he'll prove to be a credit to your railway."
"That's wonderful to hear," replied Mr. Peters. "I'm sure that Thomas and I will get on splendidly."
Mr. Peters smiled and turned to the crowd of passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you all to give a warm welcome to our visitors from the island of Sodor, Sir Topham Hatt, Thomas, and his loyal coaches Annie and Clarabelle." Everyone clapped and cheered, and Thomas looked on, feeling very proud. But no one noticed that a familiar diesel engine was watching them from afar. Early the next morning, Diesel crept into the station. He looked to see if anyone was around and saw that Thomas was sitting outside the shed dozing. He also noticed that Annie and Clarabelle were sleeping too, and an idea came to him.
"What a good idea," Diesel thought to himself. "If I shunt those trucks in front of them, then Thomas will have to spend even more time getting them back. Thomas won't be a really useful engine if he's late. And on his first day, too," chuckled Diesel deviously. "I must be careful not to wake him, though. Let's see what Sir Topham Hatt thinks of Thomas now."
And he whispered to Annie and Clarabelle.
"Sleep tight, ladies."
And as quietly as he could, Diesel scuttled away. A few hours later, Thomas awoke, tired but excited for the day ahead. He looked all around the station and took in all the new sights and sounds in front of him. He then spoke to Annie and Clarabelle. "Morning, Annie. Morning, Clarabelle." But there was no reply. Thomas looked over and realized his friends were no longer beside him. "Annie? Clarabelle? Where are you?" He suddenly heard a chorus of voices from a nearby siding. "Thomas!" "Bust my buffers!" he cried. "How did you get over there?" "Don't worry, I'm coming to get you." "Hello, you two. It's good to see you're both okay. But how did you get here?" "We don't know, Thomas," cried Annie. "Perhaps an engine from this railway put us here, thinking we were just ordinary coaches." "That is strange," said Thomas, puzzled. "Maybe it was by accident." "But we can't stand here all day," he added. "We still have a lot to do before the special event tonight, and now we're running late, so we need to hurry." Thomas arrived at the platform, and the passengers began to climb aboard Annie and Clarabelle. As he was waiting, Mr. Peters walked up and greeted him warmly. "Morning, Thomas. I hope you and your coaches are feeling well rested and ready for work." "Good morning, Mr. Peters, sir," smiled Thomas. "We certainly are, and we're looking forward to starting our journey. I'm sorry we're running a little late this morning." That's all right, Thomas, said Mr. Peters kindly. Just make sure you try and make up for the lost time. I'll try, sir, puffed Thomas. Mr. Peters smiled. That's a good engine, he said. Our passengers are our top priority here on the West Somerset Railway, and we must do everything we can to ensure that they all have a wonderful time. Don't worry, sir. We'll make sure they all have a great time. That's what I like to hear, continued Mr. Peters. It looks like you're almost ready to go. But I'll be sure to come and find you later and see how you're getting on. And with that, he turned and walked away to attend to other things. Thomas was still waiting for the last of the passengers to get on board, and he was eager to set off. Luckily, he didn't have to wait for long. It looks like everyone's on board, called Clarabel. We're ready to go now, Thomas, said Annie. Oh, that's good, puffed Thomas. Let's get going and see if we can make up for lost time. Meanwhile, Diesel was thinking of more ways he could get Thomas into trouble. As he approached Willerton Station, he saw the station master talking to one of the passengers. He was telling them about the fireworks display to be held at the party later that night. Diesel kept listening until he suddenly noticed a particular line of trucks waiting in the siding. They were waiting for Thomas to collect them and take them to the party. Diesel eyed the trucks with interest, and a devious idea came to him. If Mr. Peters thinks Thomas is so special, let's see how he feels when his precious fireworks train is misplaced, he said slyly to himself. So when the coast was clear, Diesel made his way over to the siding to collect the fireworks train and began to put his plan into action. Soon Diesel had shunted the trucks into the platforms, blocking both lines and preventing the passengers from being able to board their train. Diesel looked back and surveyed his hard work.
Let's see that bothersome blue tank engine be really useful now,
he chuckled to himself. Suddenly the station master ran up. You need to get these trucks sorted quickly, he shouted. Thomas will be along any minute, and his passengers can't be kept waiting. But before he could say anything, Diesel raced away, laughing. Back at Minehead Station, Thomas was waiting at the platform. Soon all his passengers were on board, and he was finally ready to go. Come on, he puffed to Annie and Clarabel. Let's get going and see if we can make up for lost time. But as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard someone shout. All the gifts for the party are missing, cried the station master. Once again, Thomas was puzzled. Where did the gifts go? Don't worry, we'll look for them along the way, said Thomas reassuringly. The station master smiled as Thomas blew his whistle and set off along the line. Get in quickly, please, he whistled. What's that up ahead? We should stop and check, as it could be the missing gifts. That's one of the missing gifts found, said Thomas. But how did it end up here? I know. When we stop at the next station,
we can give it to the station master. I'm sure they can look after it whilst we finish our journey. Look, there's another gift up ahead. Let's stop and collect it.
Hello, Thomas. Thanks so much for finding these gifts. It seems that there have been gifts missing from several stations. Do you think you could find any more on your journey?
Don't worry, we'll be sure to keep a good lookout and pick up any more that we find. There's another gift at the side of the track. We need to make sure that we stop and collect it. Look, there's another gift up ahead. I wonder how they ended up by the side of the track. There's the station master. Can you give them the gifts we collected, please?
Thanks for finding these, Thomas. You really are a useful engine.
Look, there's another gift at the side of the line. I do hope there aren't any more, as we don't want the passengers to miss out. Look, there's another gift up ahead. Let's stop and collect it. I do hope all these extra stops aren't going to make us even later. Perhaps if that's the last gift, we can try to make up for some lost time before we reach the next station.
As Thomas approached Watchet Station, he saw that Mr. Peters was standing on the platform. He was talking to the station master about the missing gifts, and Thomas was worried he might be in trouble for being late. But Mr. Peters wasn't cross. He was pleased.
Ah, Thomas, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to tell you that I've spoken with the station masters, and they've all told me what a great job you've been doing.
Thomas was very relieved.
Thank you, sir, he said. I'm just glad to help.
You've certainly proved yourself to be a really helpful engine by finding all the missing gifts, continued Mr. Peters.
Don't worry, I'll see to it that they arrive in time for the party tonight. In the meantime, why don't you rest here for a while? I'm sure the passengers won't mind. Oh, yes, a short rest would be nice. Thank you, sir.
That settles it then, smiled Mr. Peters.
Before you arrived, I was telling the station master about a big fireworks display we're having tonight to celebrate your visit. The fireworks have been loaded into some trucks that are waiting at Willerton Station. Do you think you could collect them and take them to the display ground later on?
Yes, sir, puffed Thomas proudly.
A fireworks display sounds wonderful, and all those loud noises and bright colours will be marvellous for the celebration. I can't wait.
Mr. Peters laughed.
I'm glad you're looking forward to it, he said. We still have lots to do before we're ready for the party to begin, so I'll see you later, Thomas. And with that, Mr. Peters headed off to make preparations for the event, and Thomas waited at the platform, enjoying his rest.
A short while later, Thomas had finished resting and was approaching Willerton Station. He was still thinking about the fireworks display that was taking place that evening. Suddenly, as Thomas rounded the bend, he saw that the tracks at the station were blocked by trucks.
Bother! Now I'm sure to be late.
Then Thomas noticed something. The trucks that were blocking both platforms were the fireworks train that Mr. Peters had sent him to collect. Who shunted all these trucks into the wrong places? Who would do such a thing? Thomas soon found out. As no sooner had Thomas wondered who was to blame, a familiar black shape rolled into view.
Diesel? What are you doing here?
Asked Thomas.
Sir Topham Hatt sent me here as part of the event,
Diesel bragged.
This is an event to celebrate Sodor, after all, and perhaps he thinks a tiny little tank engine like you can't manage on your own.
Suddenly, Thomas realized why so many strange things had been happening on the railway.
Diesel, it was you who moved Annie and Clarabelle into that siding and behind those trucks, and it was you who took the gifts. You've been the one causing all this trouble.
Diesel just looked at Thomas and laughed.
I wonder what Mr. Peters will think of you now, he jeered. Especially when he sees what a mess you've made of the fireworks train. Mr. Peters thinks I'm very useful, thank you, retorted Thomas. And once I've finished sorting out your mess, I'm going to find him and Sir Topham Hatt and tell them about all the trouble you've been causing.
But Diesel just laughed.
They'll have to find me first, he sneered.
And he raced away as quickly as he could.
We need to shunt these trucks back into the right order. Annie, Clarabelle, I'll have to leave you here whilst I sort out this mess. Do hurry, Thomas. We don't want to keep the passengers stranded here for long. I'll be as quick as I can.
Thomas managed to get the fireworks train all sorted and ready to be delivered. But he was still thinking about Diesel.
We must find Diesel before he causes any more confusion and delay. But I wonder where he went.
After coupling the fireworks train to Annie and Clarabelle, Thomas set off after Diesel.
We must find Diesel before he can cause any more trouble. There he is. Well, 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 chuckled Thomas cheekily. It looks like this troublesome engine has got engine troubles. Stop it, Thomas, wailed Diesel. This isn't funny at all. And not very reliable either, teased Thomas. Perhaps this will teach you not to play tricks.
Diesel fell silent as Thomas pushed him to the next station.
Don't worry, Diesel, said Thomas kindly. We'll get you fixed up in no time. Thank you, Thomas.
Thomas continued to pull Diesel and the train to the final destination at Bishop's Lydia. The day's work was nearly done, and Thomas was still looking forward to watching the fireworks display at the party. Diesel worried about what Sir Topham Hatt would say when they arrived.
We're almost there now, said Thomas excitedly.
But Diesel stayed silent. He wasn't looking forward to what was coming. The two engines finally arrived at the station. Sir Topham Hatt and Mr. Peters were waiting for them. Sir Topham turned and looked crossly at Diesel. Diesel, I hear you've been causing confusion and delay. I sent you to the mainland to deliver some goods, not to follow Thomas here and cause trouble.
Yes, sorry, sir, said Diesel sheepishly. I just wanted to show you that I'm just as special as Thomas is. It wasn't fair that he got to come and be admired by everyone, and I didn't.
Thomas was invited because Mr. Peters asked if he could come. Not because I think he's more special than any one of my engines, including you, Diesel. Diesel felt rather foolish.
I'm sorry, sir. And I'm sorry, Thomas. I didn't mean to cause you all this trouble.
That's all right, Diesel, said Thomas. If it were up to me, Diesel, continued Sir Topham Hatt, I would send you back to Sodor. But Mr. Peters and I have discussed it, and we think you should remain here for a while and work with Thomas and prove you can be a really useful engine.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I promise to be on my best behaviour.
Sir Topham Hatt smiled.
Don't you worry about your engine either, Diesel, said Mr. Peters. We'll take you to the workshop and get you fixed up in no time.
Diesel smiled. He was looking forward to being back in working order. Then Sir Topham Hatt turned his attention to Thomas. As for you, Thomas, due to your recovery of the gifts and rescuing of a fellow engine, you have once again proven yourself to be a really useful engine. Yes, a very fine engine indeed, added Mr. Peters.
Thomas was so proud, he didn't know what to say.
He thought his boiler would burst.